Hey everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petraglia back with another episode post Cutdown Day of the Jungle Roar podcast. I am joined by the one and only Richard Skinner. We know him better as Skinny. How you doing, Skinny of Local 12?
Mike. I've often wanted to ask you this question. You go
Yeah.
by Trags, but it's Petraglia. Why don't you go by Trolls?
So that's a very good question, and it goes back to my days in Indian Hill. And I'm going to give a shout out to Dan Kremchek, who is the brother of Doc Hollywood. That would
Yes.
be Dr. Kremchek, a great team physician of the Cincinnati Reds, among other entities in the local area. And Danny Kremchek once stopped me in the hallway and just shouted out, "Hey, Trags, what are you doing?" Because he would always give me shit. It never failed. Every single day I showed up at high school, Danny was on my back. And he was the first one to call me Trags, and it stuck with me. And then it took a hiatus. All right. You never knew so much was in a name. I'm glad you asked, Skinny. So for my first, let's say 15 years in Boston, no one, or 10 years in Boston, no one called me that. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Ian Brown, who does a great job covering the Red Sox for MLB.com, yelled out to me in the press box, "Trags, can you take care of this?" Meaning cover a press conference downstairs while he was doing something else. And I'm like, oh my God, I have not heard that in so long. And then it grew and grew and grew. And by the time Twitter hit in 2009, everybody again in Boston knew me as Trags. So that's the story of Trags.
I like it. There we go.
I'm so glad
been
you
curious
asked.
about that. I've been curious about that.
Well, now you know.
Now I know.
Let's switch the focus to a lot we do and don't know about your 2022 Cincinnati Bengals. First of all, we're not going to have a new punter. Better teams have had bigger problems than worrying about who the punter is going to be. But in this particular case, I am curious as to why the Bengals went with a guy who clearly doesn't have the stronger leg. I mean, Drew Chrisman, if you watched him in training camp, watched him in practice, watched him in the games, he had the bigger leg.
Yes.
And the obviously the company line from the Bengals on Tuesday after Cutdown Day from Zach Taylor was, we know the consistency we're going to get from Kevin Huber. Are you buying it?
Yes and no. I do buy the fact that coaches believe in trust. You know that. I mean, if they trust the guy, it takes a lot for that player to not continue to warrant that trust. And I think in the case of Kevin, I think they absolutely trust. Maybe they don't trust him to hit a 50-yard punt, but they trust him to do, excuse me, they trust him to do everything right. They trust him to drop it inside the 20 when it has to be. They trust him to hit a big punt when it has to be. They trust him to hold in a clutch situation. I think it just comes down to the trust factor. And in retrospect, looking at this, part of me thinks that this is, and you wrote about this, and I kind of agree with it, that it was hard to push maybe Mike Brown and those that have known Kevin a long time over the edge of cutting him if he wasn't awful in camp. So in retrospect, to me, it was not more Drew trying to win the job. It was, all right, does Kevin have anything left? And if Kevin has anything left, we're keeping Kevin. They are running the risk of losing Drew Chrisman.
Yes.
I think they probably will lose Drew Chrisman. If not, they're getting really lucky and they get a chance to stash him on the practice squad. And if that's the case, I think at some point this year, if he is on this practice squad and stays, because as you know, somebody could sign him to their active roster as the thing goes along. If he stays, I think at some point this year, you'll see Drew Chrisman punting for the Bengals. I believe that. I just don't know what Kevin's got left in the tank. So like I said, in retrospect, I think it was more what Kevin's got to really stink in order for him to lose the job. I thought it was more, all right, let's see what the competition's like. Because as you mentioned, in the true competition, Drew was better. We can argue directional things and all of that, and probably Kevin was better at that, but I think that's something Drew could get better at the more he did it. So yeah, you're right. There are worse problems to have, but the more now I look back on this, where I thought Drew had clearly won it, I think Kevin never lost it. And I think that was a big part of it. It was Kevin's to lose, and Kevin didn't lose it.
So if that punt on Saturday against the Rams, that Chrisman hit of 65 yards, if it goes 61 and checks
You're
at
right.
the 4-yard line, that makes a statement, right?
It's got to.
Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, it probably doesn't, but I know your point because we all joked in the press box of, see, he punted it too far. And I said, I think to you even, I'm like,
Yeah.
it's still a 45-yard net. I mean, it's not like 45-yard nets are awful, but you're
Yeah.
right. A 64-yard net or a 62-yard net or a 58-yard net down at the 7 looks a whole lot better than a team starting at the 20. And unfortunately, what happened after that? The Rams actually drove from the 20 for a touchdown. So maybe they don't do that inside the 10.
Right. And, again, we're talking about the punter situation, and that's our leadoff spot today. But there are other things that are facing the Bengals that I think are certainly, as we record this on Wednesday morning, are going to garner some attention, namely the tight end position. Now, the Bengals, on their final 53, kept 3 tight ends. There's no surprise there. Hayden Hurst, obviously Drew Sample, who's coming off a left MCL injury, and he was running wind sprints before the game Saturday.
Yeah.
He is definitely pointing towards, if not a week 1 return, I'd say week 2, week 3, and certainly before the Thursday night game against Miami, I would think. And then Mitchell Wilcox, who has an ankle injury. He also sustained that in training camp practices. There is a report that the Bengals are going to bring in O.J. Howard, the former first-round draft pick out of Alabama back in 2016. And I thought for all the world when O.J. Howard hit the NFL and hit Tampa Bay, he was going to be a monster.
Bengals loved him.
And then you thought, with Tom freaking Brady of all people, and there's no way O.J. Howard can miss with Brady as his quarterback, who loves to get the ball to tight ends. And he never materialized. So let's wait and see about O.J. Howard. First of all, if they bring him in and he passes a physical and all of that. And second of all, what is his attitude like? Because as we know, it cost the Bills over $3 million to cut the guy after signing a contract last year. Doesn't that tell you something, Skinny?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, if you look at his production, it's gone down literally every year he's been in the league. I wonder, because the question was asked of Zach Keller yesterday, who have you carried to the 53-man roster to put on IR, which then, I don't want to go through the weeds of this, but that allows you to bring that player back after a minimum of 4 weeks, as opposed to them missing the whole season. And he said Khalid Kareem, which we thought, and Cam Taylor-Britt, which we thought. Well, maybe Drew Sample's in that mix too. I mean, you mentioned it, if we're looking at the Miami game as the comeback game for these guys, for a couple of these guys, then maybe you did need to sign a tight end. Maybe he just missed a name yesterday, or maybe after yesterday they decided, let's not run the risk of this. Let's bring another body in, and maybe that's all this is just literally a 2 or a 3 or 4 week placeholder, just in case, because you have your starting tight end in Hayden Hurst. You are going to run some tight end stuff, but it'll probably be minimal, especially if it's O.J. Howard. I think this is more of a safety valve than a 17-game solution at backup tight end, to be honest.
Yes, and that's a great point. And the other thing to obviously keep in mind is this is low risk for the Bengals. I mean, the bill is already paid.
Yes, right.
By the Bills. I mean, the Bengals don't have to worry about that $3 million nut to crack. And, in this particular case, why not bring him in, see if he's got anything at all? Maybe he clicks with Joe Burrow. Maybe there's something that Brian Callahan can get through to him, or Zach, either one, and say, we're not going to expose you a lot, but when we do use you on the field, here's where we think your strengths are best suited for our offense, and move forward. I don't have a problem with that.
No, I mean, 7 to 10 snaps a game if it comes to that for 4 weeks. And if it shows something in 4 weeks, then it is a long-term solution. If it doesn't, oh well, we needed a placeholder near the placeholder. And I think it says something too about if they're going to IR somebody now at that position group, that Thad Moss is not the solution as a second or third tight end. Justin Rigg, I mean, none of the guys on the roster were a solution at that position.
You sure Justin Rigg isn't? Are you
he's
sure?
My guy. He's a UK guy. He's my guy, and I'm glad he caught the touchdown, and he's all happy he's got the ball from that touchdown, and it's a cute story. But yeah, I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah, it's too bad, but I enjoyed watching this Bengals team in the preseason, at least the last 2 games. I'll tell you why. I thought that backup quarterbacks showed something, especially Jake Browning. Even though he got cut, he could come back on the practice squad, obviously. But they were able to move the ball in must-have situations. And that's what you want to see from your backups. Can they execute? Because so many times you see backups in preseason games not be able to do anything. It looks ugly. It's terrible. They don't know what they're doing. when I watched it, Jake Browning in that final drive with about 3 minutes to go, and they scored the go-ahead touchdown against the Giants, I raised my eyebrow and I was like, but he put 7 or 8, 9 plays together. It looked good, looked consistent. Same thing with the game on Saturday night. It's a preseason game, and nobody cares if you really win or lose. But the Rams had just cut it to 9-7, and you needed a response. And I thought Jake Browning did a terrific job eating clock, moving the team down the field, and then finding Justin Rigg on that touchdown inside the red zone. Those are things that, to me, impress me about how well the team is prepared up and down the roster, not just the stars, not just the starters.
Yeah, and that drive was actually all on his back. I mean, it wasn't like he turned and handed it off 10 times and threw
Right.
the last pass. I mean, that was a very pass-heavy drive. It's interesting because I do think he comes back on the practice squad. We're taping this obviously probably just minutes before this takes place,
Right.
but I would assume that. And I was talking to somebody in the organization who talked about how much the wide receivers, like the Jamar Chases and T Higgins, those guys love him as a set of eyes. That when they come off the field and on game day he's not in uniform because he's on the practice squad, he's on the sidelines. They come to him asking, "What did you see?" Apparently, he's like a savant, like dude with this stuff, who's going to be a coach one day. So having a Jake Browning in your organization on your team, I think is actually important, as goofy as it sounds.
So, some again in the weeds stuff about the transactions of the practice squad versus the 53-man roster, and why the Bengals kept Brandon Allen. They did not want to expose Brandon Allen because he'd be a vested veteran.
Yes,
He
correct.
could sign anywhere. Whereas with Jake Browning, they could waive him. If he clears waivers, they can just simply bring him back on the practice squad. You can't, the other way around wouldn't work for them. And
Yeah,
that's
and I do think at the end of the day, as impressive as Jake Browning was in that series, Brandon Allen has skins in real games. Jake Browning does not. So Brandon's still your backup. I know it was a good storyline to talk about, and he
right.
certainly he did all he could do to push that envelope, but I don't think that envelope was ever open, to be honest.
Biggest concern to me on this team is depth on the offensive line. I think it's
Yes.
glaring. I think it's obvious. It's not depth in the secondary anymore, although there are issues back there. But depth on the offensive line is a monstrous concern to me.
Yeah.
It's one of the. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say I go back to I asked Zach that question at the end of OTAs. They had two open roster spots. I said, "Are you going to look to sign an offensive tackle?" He gave a I'm not saying he gave the mumbo jumbo answer of we'll look at every position group,
Right.
blobbity bloobity blee. Because I really thought you got to bring a tackle in at least, don't you? And they didn't. The
You
three
think?
signings they made before camp were a defensive tackle, a defensive end, and a linebacker. None of whom made the team. None of whom are going to make the team. I'm with you. Who do you trust as a backup tackle right now? Who do you trust as a backup guard? Do you trust Trey Hill as a backup center? Maybe they do, and maybe he's
I
earned that. I don't know, but I guess as funny as it sounds, when camp started, that was probably my bigger worry than these other backup spots, and now it's probably my lesser worry than all these other backup spots.
I don't think there's any question about that. When Trey Hill is, you're probably your most likely dependable backup along the offensive line. Hakeem Adeniji has skins in the game, and he obviously is a high round draft pick. Hakeem was, well, not high round, but 6th round in 2020.
But he's played. Yeah, he's played.
He
He's played.
played.
Yeah,
He played in a Super Bowl. He started in a Super
right.
Bowl. You're talking about, not a lot of guys along that offensive line who have experience. And then obviously we can't ignore the elephant in the room, Jackson Carman, why he was kept. Everybody that I saw on Twitter, all the fans were screaming for him to be cut. Now, again, this has to do with the machinations of why of cap, of the NFL cap, and why you cut players and why you keep players. The Bengals were not going to commit to the $3 million cost like the Bills did on OJ Howard. Bengals were not going to do that with Jackson Carman.
Like the Raiders did with Alex Leatherwood.
Yeah, and we can get to that as well. Again, we haven't seen the complete waiver claims come out yet.
Right.
And people are wondering, well, why the hell did you tape the pod today, Trags? But schedules are schedules, Skinny. We all know that. But anyway, I digress. Jackson Carman, his future on the Bengals offensive line is
maybe as a backup tackle guard. He played tackle in college. I think that's the next maybe
yep.
last step to take. He doesn't look like he can play guard in the
Can't
league.
move his feet.
Can't
And
move his feet. It was funny because in OTAs, and I know it was on air. I watched a couple of plays, and again, they don't have helmets. They're on air. It's lighter. It's all those things. I thought he looked noticeably more athletic. Now, unfortunately, when you wanted to write something like that, the rape storyline, the alleged rape storyline was a thing, so you
yep,
couldn't write glowing things about Jackson Carman's athleticism while that was still hanging over everybody's head before we were able to ask him that question. Now it's kind of gone by the wayside because the question's been asked and somewhat answered by him. And I thought, okay, maybe you're getting it. And they plugged him in with the ones, and they wanted him to win the job, and they gave him every opportunity to win the job, and he didn't. And so now this is back-to-back years where he's kind of washed out after they've given him chances. And so now the next step is, okay, he was a tackle in college. Let's go that route and see what that's like. I don't think it's going to work out well. Yeah, I don't. I think the future is you better get better in a hurry, because after this year into next year, at that point from the salary cap ramifications you're talking about, it's not negligible, but it's certainly more minimal than it is now. You better be better by next year, man, or you're out of this team. You may be in the. I mean, Cedric Wade stuck in the league until yesterday somehow, some way for 7 years. So probably Jackson can continue to find a home somewhere, but it's not going to be here.
there are two ways usually you get through to a player like Jackson Carman. One is through technique, one is through intensity. And I'm getting to Frank Pollock, the offensive line coach here. How much fire do you think Frank Pollock is under to get more out of some of the younger players? We know what the veterans are. We think that they signed, obviously, the free agents, Lael Collins, Alex Kappa,
Right.
and Ted Karras. We know what we're getting there. Volson is going to make rookie mistakes, but he looks like he has a competitive fire. And Jonah Williams is absolutely a known commodity. He's going to get beat, but every tackle in the National Football League gets beat on certain plays. But with a guy like Jackson Carman, does Frank Pollock need to worry more about teaching the technique to the guy? Because what I see on film, Jackson Carman doesn't play with a lot of, I hate using this because it's so ambiguous, but fire. He doesn't play with a lot of
No, he doesn't
intensity.
finish reps.
And if you don't finish reps, to me, Skinny, that's an indication that the guy doesn't have the fire in the belly. And if that's the case, you got to work more on his technique. You got to, work on his hand placement, his foot movement, his technique, his get off, all of that. And that's what I wonder, you know, does Frank need to do more to get through to Jackson Carman?
I, I think Frank is a big technique guy. Most offensive line coaches are. I mean, that's what he's been praised for by Zach Taylor and those that he's gotten through to and the veterans who have come over. I think you have to look at the player in this case. And, I think you have to look back at that draft and say, was that a Frank pick? Was that a Duke pick? Was that a above them pick? I mean, whose pick was that? If it was a Frank pick, well, then shame on Frank. If it was not a Frank pick and they said, no, we like this guy, you're going to have to make it work, well, then shame on them too, right? At that point, you as a position coach, you can only do so much. Again, if you're the one that evaluated and you're the one that maybe stumped for him, well, then shame on you. That's on you. I don't get the sense that's the case with Frank and Jackson Carman, in my opinion.
See, that's interesting to me. And, if they could just get something out of Jackson Carman, it would.
I think they've tried. I think it's one of those that again, the next last step to me is, all right, let's get you back to your natural position and see if that works. I don't think it will. I just don't think football is important to him, and I've thought that for a long time.
Important enough.
Yeah, important enough, correct, and maybe it is. They've tried it. I mean, to run with the third string on your first day of training camp as a rookie, as a second round pick, if that wasn't a slap in the face, what was? And then they literally gave him this job in OTAs. I thought it was very symbolic. They had him running with the ones. You're our guy. Don't lose this job. We're giving it to you. Win it. You don't even have to win. Just don't lose it. And he lost it. And he lost it to, I don't even know if I don't even know if Cordell Wilson's that much better yet. I mean, you talk about throwing something to the weeds here. You're taking a guy who was a tackle at a small college and making him a guard and starting in the NFL against that Pittsburgh Steelers front in week 1. Woo.
Well, I do think they feel like he's going to have help around him.
Well, he's better than the guy that sucks.
Better than Jackson Carman right now. There's no question about that. He's not. We're not putting him in Canton, obviously, but
No.
I think Volson is somebody they think has the want to and has the desire and will not be intimidated. Again, he's going to get beat. He's going to whiff. He's going to do some of the things, some of the same things that Jackson Carman's doing. And I think Jackson Carman's going to wonder, well, I could have done that. And he's going to wonder to himself, well, why can I be that guy? Or maybe the Bengals want him to think that. They want to piss him off. Do something. Hey, Jackson, do you have a competitive bone in your body? Fight for the job. Be angry. Do something. Show fire. And I just don't think they see that. What about Alex Leatherwood of the Raiders, cut by the Raiders? That's a fascinating one. Some background there. He is a first-round draft pick out of Alabama, a tackle, offensive tackle. In 2021, you almost never see a first-round pick given up on by a team that drafted him 2 years in.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was a national report yesterday. I can't remember. I think it was Albert Breer who reported that the Raiders called around the league. Now he said there were 32 no's. That would include the Raiders saying no to themselves. So there were 31 no's.
They might have.
In trade talk. And maybe they did talk to themselves about a trade, and they said no, we're not going to trade him for ourselves. But there were apparently, everybody in the league said no. Now there are some things with that too, because you're going to have to take the contract on. It's a rookie deal, but it's still money.
Right.
You're obviously going to have to give something back in form of a draft pick, even if it's a late round pick. But I think it is telling that that somebody's offering you a first round graded guy who was selected last year for whatever compensation level you wanted back on a rookie deal. We're not talking about taking $120 million guaranteed here. We're talking about taking a rookie deal. And everybody, literally every team, the worst of the worst even said, nah, we're good. I mean, if that doesn't speak volumes.
The Bengals said no.
Yes.
The Bengals said no to that.
The Houston Texans said no. The Jacksonville Jaguars said, the bad teams said no. That's crazy to think, and I think it speaks volumes.
Yeah, it definitely does. All right, we've talked about the backup quarterback, about the punter. I want to get to the secondary.
Yeah.
And one of the great feel-good stories as we wrap up here on the Jungle Roar podcast, Alan George, the rookie out of Vanderbilt, undrafted rookie out of Vanderbilt. He's your fourth corner, essentially, right now behind Eli Apple. We're assuming Eli's going to be ready for the
season. Trey Flowers.
Right. Give me time to get.
I'm sorry, Trags.
I'm sorry,
Charles.
Eli Apple. That's not going to stick. Eli no. Apple, Cheeto, Trey Flowers, and then you have Alan George, right? At this point, because
Mike
is on IR. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike Hilton's the slot guy. So yeah, you're talking outside corner.
And I'm not. When I say corners, I do mean guys on the outside.
Yeah,
you're not
sure.
playing Mike Hilton on the outside. So, what do you think of Alan George? What impressed you about him in training camp in the preseason?
Here's what impressed me. Okay, so he was really good leading up to preseason game 1, right? It was kind of the story. I think Charlie Goldsmith of the Enquirer wrote a nice piece about him, a nice takeout about him. He was kind of the story. And then in preseason game 1, he was not a disaster, but he had the defensive pass interference. He got beat on a couple routes, and you thought, okay, feel good story guy. Welcome to lights being on, and you're just not going to cut it. And he came back off of that game, and he was really good the last few weeks of not only camp, but then in preseason games. And that showed me, hey, he put that behind him. He did what good corners do. And I'm not here to put him in the good corner category yet. He barely made this roster, and it's great.
Right.
But that showed me a lot that you didn't play very well the first time the lights went on, and you shook it off and then played great the rest of camp and in the last 2 preseason games. And maybe that showed something to the staff as well. So that's what it showed to me is, hey, you do what good corners do. You have a bad day, I mean, remember Eli Apple last year? We were all on him. The fans were on him. He stunk for 5 or 6 weeks. He put it behind him, and he became really good until, unfortunately, the Super Bowl when he wasn't very good. But you forgot about Eli Apple for a while. I thought that said a lot to me about Alan George.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, it allays some of the concern anyway about depth in the corner. But if there's a corner out there, I think they still would
absolutely
welcome him in and acquire some veteran depth with experience. Go ahead.
Lamar Parrish, go get him.
Oh, we could have this conversation. Okay, a little inside baseball, literally story here. Skinny and Butch Hobson got into a spirited debate about Lamar Parrish versus Ken Riley. I happen to believe that they both belong in the Hall of Fame for different reasons. Lamar Parrish was the preeminent punt returner of his day in the NFL, along with being a Pro Bowl freaking cornerback.
6 of 8 years in the Pro Bowl with the Bengals.
There you go. And Ken Riley, 60. All you have to say with Ken Riley is 65 to me. He's going to get in, by the way, in February. That's my prediction.
I'm with you on
Late
that,
January it
and
is.
I'm not besmirching him by any stretch. I'm just more of a Lamar Parrish guy.
Yeah, I understand this, but you would not have thought, you would have definitely thought you were besmirching him when we were at a gathering at a Reds game on Monday night, and I almost thought about getting in between Skinny and Butch.
He's my guy. Yeah, he knows he's my guy.
Leap and Lamar. We need we need some color like that on this Bengals team, and we do have it with Jamar Chase. I think we
Yes.
have some personalities on this team. To me, Skinny, as we wrap up here, that's one of the fun things about covering this Bengals team is there's a ton of personality combined with a ton of skill, and there aren't really any bad apples in that locker room. That is something that sticks out to me, and to me, that does matter on a championship caliber team.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen other locker rooms in past years um, with the Jesse Bates situation. Maybe they would have welcomed him back with open arms too. Maybe they would have understood the business side of it. But I think there would have been a couple of guys who wouldn't have understood that. I think this locker room fully understood it, fully understands what a leader he is, and all those things, and welcomed him back without even batting an eye. And it wasn't just team speak and player speak. I think that was truthfully the case. And you're right. I mean, I covered some Marvin teams where there were parts of the locker room you just didn't venture to, man. You just didn't do it.
So the bigger thing to me with regard to that is it would not, in those teams you speak of, years ago with the recent memory with the Bengals and Marvin Lewis, it would not have been player against player. I think the bigger concern would have been players against ownership.
Yeah.
Look what ownership is doing to Jesse, and then it would have become a nasty situation. And that's what the Bengals were able to avoid with this.
Yes.
Is that the players bought into what the ultimate goal is, and they weren't chippy about management. Their whole company line was, it's business. From Burrow right on down, this is business. We understand that. We're not going to, get on management for what they have to do. We're going to support Jesse. And that's the reason, to me, this was able to kind of work itself out, at least for a 1-year tag.
Yeah, agreed. But you're right about the locker room. It's one where you venture into, and I mean, you got guys playing ping pong, guys playing this crazy card game in the back, some guys who go do their own thing, and they let them do their own thing. But it's a comfortable place to go, and I've been in a few of those where it's very uncomfortable.
All right. Well, they also have cornhole. They have a great.
Yes, I forgot about that. You're right. They do. You're right.
They do. And you walk right through it. It's 27 feet apart. You know that, Skinny. Those are the rules of cornhole.
Yeah, I want to be the guy one time to reach up and grab one of the bags and just throw it back at a player and see how that works.
Given your athletic acumen, I'm sure you would do that with
great.
He is Richard Skinner of Local 12. You can follow him at Local 12 Skinny. I got that right on Twitter, right?
You did.
Anything else you want to plug, Skinny?
No.
High school sports. I'd love you to get that out there.
Yeah, I'm a big high school sports fan. I do some games for ESP Media. We do the Eastern Cincinnati Conference sports. I do a lot of them. Got a football game this Friday with Kings and Walnut Hills that I'll be doing, and some games for Star 64 as well. So yeah, I coach high school basketball. I love high school sports in general, but it doesn't put all the bread on the table. So I have to do something a little more formal.
He is the one and only Richard Skinner. Skinny, thanks for joining me, and here's to a fun and eventful 2022 Bengals season.
Trials, thanks for having me, man. As always, you're a good dude.
All right. Take care, Skinny.
All right, man.
All right. That is the Jungle Roar podcast for this week. Follow me on YouTube and subscribe to my Jungle Roar podcast. We'll have complete coverage throughout the season.